Step 1, tape the end of your yarn to the back top corner of your loom. Step 2, on the front of your loom, wrap the yarn across and then next to each peg of your loom. Pretend like you are going across the street to visit a neighbor and then next door to that neighbor. Across the street, next door. Across the street, next door. It's a repeating pattern of across the street and next door until the loom is completely warped. When you get to the end of your loom, flip it over, tape the end of the yarn to the top corner of the back of your loom, and cut the extra yarn. If you find a loom that is already warped and ready to weave on, even if it has some extra yarn on it, like it's already been started, you can use that loom if it does not have a name and a class code on the tape on the back of the loom. Please make sure you write your name on the tape on the back of your loom. A weaving needle is not a necessity, it's definitely a luxury, but since we have them, you're welcome to use them and then return them at the end of your class period. To thread the needle, you place your yarn through the eye of the needle and then tie a single knot around the end of the yarn and through the eye of the needle, just like you see here. We're going to weave in an under-over pattern on this weaving, and when you get to the end, that becomes very important because you're going to need to alternate and do the opposite of the under-over pattern, and you're going to make it an over-under pattern to make sure your thread does not pull through. Another thing that can help your thread not pull through is by leaving a finger length of yarn at the end. Whenever you get to the end of your yarn, just make sure there's at least a finger length left out. Now I'm going back through with an over-under pattern, which is the opposite of the pattern I just wove. I wove under-over for the first strand. Now I'm going over-under for the second one, so it doesn't just pull all of the work I did on the first strand back through. When you get to the end of this strand, you're going to need to be very careful so you do not pull your warp threads, or on my board, it's the yellow threads. We don't want to pull those too tight, so we leave just a very, very tiny little loop about the size of the end of a pencil, or maybe if you could put a pencil in there and keep a little space, that's what you want to do. When you go back the other direction, you're using the opposite pattern. So I went over under on the second thread. Now I'm going under over again for my third pass here. Again, when I get to the end, I'm making sure not to pull too tight. I'm leaving a little space, and then I am scrunching all of those weft threads. The green ones are called, they're my weft threads because I'm weaving them over and under. They are going to be scrunched up at the top of my board because I want to make them nice and tight so they are secure. If you pull too tight, your end weft threads will start to pull in, and it will be very difficult to tell which one you should weave over and which one you should weave under. It will get tangled, so definitely make sure you're leaving just a little bit of space at the end of each row. When you make it to the end of your piece of yarn, you want to make sure that there's about a finger length left at the end as well. So I'm going to scrunch all of that extra yarn down. I'm going to untie the knot by grabbing the knot and wiggling the knot back and forth. And then I make sure that I leave that long piece at the end about 1 finger long. If it's a little more than 1 finger, you can trim it down just a little bit. You want to be able to tie it later on. I'm starting with a different color for my second part of my pattern, and I'm tying on a purple piece of yarn. This yarn is 2 arms long or an arm span long, and I'm going to start the process where I left off, and I'm going to start in the opposite pattern. You can see I left off going under. I need to start with the purple going over. So I'm just continuing my patterns of over, under, and then under, over, and then over, under, and then under, over. Whatever direction is alternating for you, that's what you want to do to make sure your weaving stays together and stays nice and solid.